In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind. Our Eye on the SEC is brought to you by Miller Eye Care and Optical, 694-2622.
For our first look at SEC spring practices, we bring in friend of the show from the 24/7 Sports Network, the Georgia team site, dogs247.com, senior writer Gentry Estes. Gentry, Vince Ferrara, Jesse Smithey. How you been, Gentry?
I'm good. Good to be with you guys again.
Well, we appreciate it. Were you on hand for that Georgia Bulldogs win once again against Tennessee on Saturday?
I was. Busy day. They first spring football practice was that morning, and then the Riders kind of hustled over to the basketball game. A little surprised by the basketball game, no question. I figured Tennessee, after losing to Georgia the first time and then winning 6 in a row, would play a little better than they did, to be honest.
Well, let's talk about spring practice. A huge class for Georgia in that signing class by Mark Richt and the staff, and then a bunch. I think 13 is the number of early enrollees. Talk about that group of early enrollees and some of the players that have a chance to really contribute.
Well, obviously, I think 13 is the largest number Georgia's had under Richt in terms of guys who come in early for spring practice, and I think that. You've got several in that group who could make a real impact on this year's team. I think that Georgia's numbers were pretty low scholarship-wise last year. They had gotten down to about 70, so they needed a big class, and they got one. They were able to back count a lot of these early enrollees and then sign 33. And, that 33 is going to be probably like 40% of the team this year. So I think, it gets started with the early enrollees and the guys there now, and, very few of them are in line for a red shirt. These guys are trying to play.
Gentry, one of the things that you listed on your things to watch for Georgia spring practice was wide receiver Jonathan Rumpf, a junior college guy, 6'5", 220. I mean, is he on campus now? Is he going through spring drills?
Yes, he is. And he was a little bit under the radar guy. He's originally from Columbia, South Carolina, and he wasn't recruited much out of high school. I think it had to do with his grades. And, he went to JUCO, Mississippi for 2 seasons, and now is at Georgia. I mean, he's a big kid, athletic kid. Just watching him in drills on Saturday, he looks very smooth, running routes, catching the ball. He's built a lot like Marlon Brown was for Georgia in the last few years, and he seems to be. It's early, and we'll see what happens the rest of spring, but he seems to be a pretty talented guy who can help him right away.
Visiting with Gentry Estes from dogs247.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, talking about Georgia beginning spring practice on Saturday. What about all the losses on defense? A lot of stars moving on to the NFL. Gentry, are a lot of those position battles, or do you think there's a natural next guy up for them, some of those spots on defense?
Probably both, case by case. I think in certain situations, who that next guy is going to be. I mean, the next Jarvis Jones will be Jordan Jenkins, who had a real good freshman year, and I think could put out Jarvis Jones type numbers in that same role. To be honest, I think he'll do well with that. And but some other spots it is pretty wide open in the secondary. The 2 safety spots are certainly going to be ones to watch all through spring and probably going into August. And the defensive line, they're needing to replace a nose guard, a defensive end there. So and inside linebacker replacing Alec Oger. I mean, really, you lose about 8 starters on that defense. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do this year because there's certainly a lot of guys to replace.
So no Keith Marshall during spring practice, right?
Not right now. They're expecting back after spring break. They're going to practice this week and then break for spring break. He should be back after that.
With Aaron Murray going into his senior year, how much did he entertain the notion of going towards the NFL draft? Because all accounts are that it's not a really strong quarterback class in this year's NFL draft.
It's not, but I think he looked into it. He got his projection, and he talked to his family and didn't make a rash decision. But if you saw Aaron Murray after the SEC championship game, you were pretty sure he was coming back. His reasons for coming back, I don't think have anything to do with Heisman trophies and All-American honors and this and that. I think he just wants to win a championship, and that was his. He basically said that had he gone on, he would have always wondered what would have happened this last year. And the offense returned to 9 starters, and they should. And that's from a group that was among the best in the SEC last year. So I think that he looks around and sees what that offense could do, and wanted to come back and see what happened.
With that amount of guys coming back on offense, how important of a year is this for Mark Richt as far as his career? I'm not saying he's on the hot seat, but if he doesn't win an SEC championship or even get there, do the Georgia fans begin to get into this Mark Richt fatigue thing where they appreciate what he's doing, but he just hasn't been able to take them to that next level?
Well, it's a fair question. This is really the first year going in. Will be my fourth season since I've come back to cover Georgia, and it'll be the first time people aren't saying Mark Richt's on the hot seat going into the year. But I don't know. I think the Mark Richt fatigue was probably reached about 07, 08.
Yeah.
He's been here a while, and he's won a lot of games. But yeah, I think there's a sense that Georgia is the Phil Mickelson, so to speak. Back before he won the match, they're the team in the SEC that's done the most without winning a national title during this little run, and clearly that's the goal, and they got pretty close to it last year. So I think the fact they got so close last year is helping now. It's keeping things a little more driven and focused as they prepare for another year because they know how close they got.
Gentry Estes from Dogs247.com joining us. Last thing with you, Gentry. Outside of the defense, we talked about how some of those positions are there's some battles and there's some next guys up. But offensively, what are some questions that you have? Any on the offensive line or receivers, things you might be looking for in the spring?
Well, you're always looking for young, more inexperienced guys to step up. But they return all 5 starters on the offensive line. They didn't lose a single offensive lineman, period. All the lettermen are back. And you also you lose 2 receivers in Tavares King and Marlon Brown, and that's about it offensively. They've got pretty much everyone else back. They've got good running backs, Gurley and Marshall. If there is one concern, it's that they don't have a lot of depth at running back behind them. But the receiving core looks good. You've got an experienced quarterback. The top 2 running backs are what they are, and the offensive line's experience. Georgia should be pretty good offensively this year.
If there was one last thing with you, if there was one guy that's an early enroll that you think has the best chance to have an impact or have the biggest role this year, who would that be?
Well, we mentioned Rump earlier, and he might be one, but I'd say also Trey Matthews at safety. He was a pretty highly regarded recruit, and he enrolled early at a position where Georgia clearly needs some help, and I think he's got a good chance to start as a true freshman at safety, especially by coming in early and getting the defense down and getting up to speed as early as he is. I think he'd be one to watch.
Can learn a lot more about Georgia in spring practice from Gentry Estes, Dogs247.com, the Georgia team site on the 24/7 Sports Network. You can follow him on Twitter at Gentry Estes, ESTES 247.